I want more than just a piece. Wanna be heard from the west to the east. I worked in my craft and I prayed for my time on the scene. The man have never left my team. 19, learned the right creed. Nah, I'm not a right breed, but I might be. In my crease, Nikes, hit up my G. I'll still never sell out my theme. Well, you know about heritage, you go inherited. Don't chill with the snakes, but the flow's still venomous. Perspective is everything. So much lemonade, I don't know what a lemon is.
David, it's very good to have you back with us in person. We've done two podcasts together already, but this is our first time in person. Am I as tall as you imagine I would be?
Yes, yeah. Just exactly as tall.
Exactly. I'm not a catfish.
But no, it's great to be in person and in a very nice studio space as well.
Very kind.
So we're loving it.
Well, so I've started this thing where I ask people to kind of introduce themselves, really, rather than doing the whole David was born in and he was whatever.
Sure.
Because people think about what they do differently to how they're introduced sometimes.
Fair.
So how would you describe who you are, what you do, how do you think about your work?
Sure, good question. So, very good question for my background specifically. I think my background's been quite wide-ranging. So, I started off my career in marketing actually. So, doing like design, marketing, then went into corporate law. That was always the goal. Obviously, being an immigrant coming from Nigeria, that's the dream, is to end up in like law or banking or something like that.
Why? Is that to let other people in or?
No, that's what they want you to do. You have to be a doctor or a lawyer, something like that. Yeah. So
doctor, lawyer, or
yeah, exactly. So I played my part. I did that for about 5 years or so, and then the last few years, I've been doing a mix of entrepreneurship and startups. So right now, I'm working full time in a startup in product strategy, and then also running some businesses and stuff on the side as well. The primary of which being the knowledge. So we have a podcast as well, the newsletter, the course, all of that.
Yeah, I've read some of them, and I think you spoke about it last time. The aim of that community is like kind of leveling up, growing, personal growth, development, stuff like that.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And when did you start it?
2 years ago now. Yeah. 2 years ago, but I think it's been a constant evolution. So originally it just started as a newsletter and me just sending stuff to random friends. And it's grown to over 2,000 people now, which is great.
I love what's happening these days with newsletters and Substack and people kind of building their own communities. It's been really cool to see. I see a lot of people doing it. And I just think it's great the fact that you can actually build a community now. I've got a book club and we just finished reading this book called Tribes by Seth Godin. You might know it.
Yeah.
And it just speaks about this idea. Well, it says a lot of things, but I think the main thing I took away is this idea that, whatever you do, there are people out there who care about what you do.
Yeah.
Who care about the same things you care about, who are passionate about what you're passionate about. And he sort of set everyone on a journey to try and find those people and assemble a group of those people.
Yeah.
If you had to describe the community you've built with the knowledge, how would you define that community?
It's a really good question. I think very much in line with what you're saying. So the tagline we use is for people that want to, originally it was like learn more and live better. So we're kind of going for this intersection of learning and acquiring lots of information that can be useful.
Yeah.
And then also information that can improve your quality of life as well. I think now the balance is things to help you work smarter. So productivity and related things, but then also still capturing this element of, I think the reality is people are busy, right? We just had this pandemic, we've come out of it, there's a lot going on. People live incredibly busy lives and rarely have time to pause and prioritize and think about what's important to them and how they can make the best use of their time and how to use their time most effectively. I think within the productivity movement, and we'll probably talk a bit more about this in a minute, is there are very different sides. On one side, you get a lot of people that are like, oh my gosh, you have to squeeze all the value out of every single moment that you have, and everything has to be productive. If it's not productive, you're doing something wrong, etc. And then on the other side, I think you're now getting a lot of this slow productivity movement where people are like, okay, but do you have to be working all the time? How about instead of productivity doesn't necessarily need to be about working all the time, but it's about leveraging your time effectively. to do the things that have the most value to you. So if resting and napping and spending time with your family are the highest value things to you, then how can you optimize your time so that you're spending and getting the most out of that time that you spend versus the time you spend working or the time you spend doing other things?
It's interesting because, off air we were talking about this idea that the productivity movement, as you called it. I didn't know it was a movement. But
I think, on social media and stuff.
It gets a lot of stick, doesn't it? People kind of talk down. And I have to confess, I'm also one of the people that talk down. I remember I was a productivity junkie when I was younger because I just, I thought I was super busy and I had a lot to do. So I would always read these books about time management and whatever. And then the issue, I guess, I started to have with it, and maybe you can help me. I'm always getting guests to help me with stuff. This is like a personal therapy session. But the issue I had is you read a lot of productivity stuff and you start to think you are actually very productive because your knowledge, as as your community is called, has increased, but you're not actually doing anything. Like, you're just reading all these books and you have like a 3-hour chat about time management, but your time is still not well managed. So, is that one of the reasons it gets the stick it does? Because it's like reading about something, like folks who read lots of business books and, they read about, they know everything about Steve Jobs and everything about, all these kind of great business people, but then there's no application. Is that one of the reasons why you think the industry gets the kind of stick it does? It makes people very kind of intelligent and knowledgeable, but their lives often stay the same. Yeah,
absolutely. I think there's two parts of it. One is definitely what you were just mentioning, where there is a lot that can just become about consumption. And it's just about reading all the books, learning all the stuff, doing all the practices, but then you're almost kind of living this gimmick. And is your life any better? Are you actually getting what you want out of life versus doing the image? And actually, this goes back to another conversation we had. We were talking about desk setups, right? And I think that's a very similar analogy.
Yeah.
People spend loads of time watching all these YouTube videos. The desk has to look like this. You need to have this standing desk. You need to have these speakers. It has to be so clean. But is it clean all the time? Or is it just clean for that video? And so I think it's about getting away from this super curated, this is exactly what perfection should look like.
Yeah.
And realizing that for the majority of people, that's not reality and it's not practical. And in practicality, a lot of people have papers. A lot of people have random stuff that they need somewhere to put it. And so actually, what's the best desk setup? It's often going to be one that's practical. So maybe you should have a container where you can put the stuff that is actually going to be on your desk instead of pretending that in this imaginary world, you're just going to have a super clean desk. You're going to have one light bulb here, and that's all you're ever going to have.
Is this shade? Because I do have a light bulb on my desk.
No, but as in, but you also have containers. You have things for places for things to go. So I think that's one part of it. The other part that I think rubs people the wrong way about a lot of the productivity talk is the fact that there's a lot of anxiety that's created about it, right? Because there's a lot of pressure that, you're struggling, you're not happy, you must be doing something wrong. Why don't you have this figured out? Why is this hard for you? All of the, I think that is the part of it where it's very, you're impressing on people the fact that there's a correct way to do things, there's a correct way to manage things. And I don't think that's accurate either. So it's really about finding a balance between the two.
Well, it's interesting because I think I was on your Twitter once and folks just follow you tweet about lots of kind of really interesting things, not least, other businesses like coffee and, we'll talk about that later on. But I was on your Twitter and I saw your desk and there was a treadmill under your desk.
Yes.
And I thought to myself, that's new. Like, I've seen a lot of desk setups. I have yet to see a treadmill. So, is that practical? Do you use it? Like, and where are you going? Like, what's...
This is maximum productivity. You must be doing all things at all times.
Yeah.
So, funnily enough, again, that's where it's kind of this balance. So, on one hand, you can think of that as the prototypical. I don't want to become like some tech guy where you have all the technology. It's a standing desk. You've got the treadmill underneath. You've got the speakers.
So is that a thing? People walk whilst working?
Yes, but for me, it's actually practical because For me, what it was, I love walking in general. I love getting outside and walking. And I'll walk for hours. I do that every weekend. I try and do it every day. But honestly,
So
again,
the train strikes must have been
does
great
it
for you.
does
You're
it
like,
happen all the time? No. Like, you know, there's days where you're supposed to walk, you're supposed to do exercise. I'm supposed to go to the gym. Me and the gym have had this on-off relationship for a long
it's
time.
complicated.
And you don't. So for me, the compromise was, okay, you know, I already have a standing desk. I'll just get the treadmill. I'll put it under my desk. I move my chair, and now I have to use it. And so it just makes me exercise. I did it this morning. I did it yesterday morning.
You walk and work, or you just work
Yeah,
out?
so usually what I'll do, it depends what I'm doing, but yeah, you can walk at a specific speed. So I know I can go up to like 4 miles an hour and I can still be like typing and walking and stuff. I mean, this is the...
Any higher, what's going to happen?
I can't do it, yeah. So as long as I keep it under a certain limit, then at least I can get some exercise. But it's cool, and time passes without you thinking. So this morning, I was actually doing some editing, and I walked for like an hour. But you're not thinking I'm walking for an hour. You're just doing it because you're already on it, and you're just doing your work. And the same way time passes passively while you're working. At least you're exercising and not being immobile, because I think that's the other issue. So I do a mix of working at home, this hybrid thing, working at home, go to the office. The days where you're working at home, you're sitting in your chair for, particularly if you do entrepreneurship or if you do things outside of work, suddenly you're at your desk for 10,
Literally
12 hours a day. Yeah. So it's really just important to be able to get out of your chair.
I need to work out if that would work for me, this idea of, this kind of treadmill thing. Because I love working out, you know, I like fitness and stuff like that. But I don't know, I guess I'm just thinking about sweating whilst working. Like I can imagine being on a call, I'm just like sweating. Everyone's like, Mike, you okay? And I'm like, oh, you're just working out, you know. Yeah. But also, I'm not good at multitasking at all, which might be a shocker to some.
I'm not.
I mean, people who work with me know, like, if they say something, I didn't hear it. If I'm doing something else, you literally have to stop me, and then I have to turn around and be like, okay. And it's interesting because, you know, like you know, I've got a community that I'm building too about personal development, self-development and things like that. I'm super passionate about the industry, even though I fell out of love with it, you know, years ago. I'm still passionate about this idea of just being the best version of yourself, being, you know, better than who you were yesterday. And there is a tension I find, which you articulated, which is, you know, is there a movement that could be called like real productivity, like actual things to do? Because there's all these methods of, like, you know, someone said that they only work in 20-minute sprints, you know, and I was like, okay, I can see why that would be cool to try out, but how could you actually live a life where you work for 20 minutes and pause and for 5 and then work for another 20? It's like, what job will accommodate that? You know, what is that really practical?
But you know what? Okay, so on that, I would try it if I was you. It depends okay, so there's this idea called flow, that if you're good at finding flow, which is essentially, you know, you're in the zone, time passes, you're fully immersed in your work, the words come naturally, whatever you're doing, it just comes extremely naturally. That's where everyone kind of wants to get to, where you're ultimately just being very productive without trying. It's effortless. But I think that's really hard. And so that's what you were talking about with the 25-minute timer, is like a Pomodoro technique. And sometimes that is useful. And what I found it useful for, I actually now have this like puck that has the time on it, and then you turn it to set however much time. But you lose track of time really easily. What I do, right? You can be sitting at your desk, puttering around, you answer some emails, you do a bit of this, do a bit of that. You're not trying to multitask, you're just getting distracted. And you're in this loop of distraction where 25 minutes goes past, what have you done? Not much, because you started doing a bit of work. This email came in, oh, you have to check that. Someone sent you a Slack message, oh, I have to check that. So you did do some stuff, but you didn't actually do some stuff. You didn't do what you needed to do. And so having that allows you to have tunnel vision for a period of time, particularly when you don't want to do something, when something is going to be hard to do. If you set 25 minutes and you say, okay, I'm not going to do anything else, I'm going to focus on this thing, no matter how hard it is. It's only 25 minutes. I'm just going to stick with this thing. And usually that is the aim, in my mind, should be that is what helps you to get into flow. So what you want to happen is you start doing it for 25 minutes, then, you're actually already in it. The timer goes off, you just stop it, you keep going. That's where you want to get to.
It's interesting because I think a lot of this stuff, and my reservations with some of, you're right, some things definitely work. Like for me, for instance, I like to do difficult tasks first, right? The whole kind of eat the frog method or whatever it is. So, if I start my day, I will choose my most difficult thing because I have different teams that I manage. My mornings are just messaging people, making sure everyone knows what they're doing. And then I'll do a difficult task. And that's been quite helpful for me because once I smash that, I'm just like, just 5 more things to do. And these are easy things like maybe scheduling some stuff or, replying to emails, whatever. I get that. But I just wonder if a lot of it is great for entrepreneurs who gets to essentially invent and set their own time. But we all, if you have a job, a 9 to 5, so to speak, you have to exist in a certain framework that's been built already by a company. And so all these techniques sometimes like rail against that established framework.
Yeah.
And so realistically, it's what's leading, I think, in part to this thing. When I speak to young people, like, what do you want to do? I want to be an entrepreneur. All right. Do you have any ideas? Are you angry about anything? Oh, no. No idea. Nothing at all. Like, I'm not even interested in things. I'm not even curious. I think curiosity is literally one of the major things every entrepreneur needs to have. Like, you just got to be curious. Even if it's a tiny bit of curiosity and a tiny bit of imagination. But you have people who now, I guess, have decided that that's the road for them because, it's the only road that gives them the freedom to set up their own time and set up their own lives. I mean, is that a good thing, would you say? Or is it a bad thing? Because I'm not sure where I sit on where we're going societally when I think about young people who all want to be business people but don't care about business or even like business.
I'm going to throw part of this question back at you.
Okay.
But even just thinking about what you were saying, I think it definitely resonates with me, and I've found the exact same thing. And I think what people are often looking for in their work that is typically missing, not necessarily always with 9 to 5 work, but it is, the reason it's hard to find in 9 to 5 work is because there's a lack of clarity. You perceive yourself to be on this conveyor belt where you go to university, you go through whatever it is that you're told to do, you're on this path. And every year you get 1 year older, you can't escape from that. Every year there is the cohort that you grew up with, a lot of them are following a traditional path. There's an expectation of what you've been told that you're supposed to be doing. And so you're following that path and you're doing this job and you're doing this, you're doing that. And so people don't always feel like they have the optionality to step back from that and think, okay, what do I actually want from my work? Where do I actually want to be? What do I want to do? And so then going to the point that you were making, I think what people often find that's missing is one is a sense of freedom, and then the other is a sense of what you might call passion or joy that you find in your work. And I think that is why people then say, oh, but I want to be an entrepreneur. What people don't realize is that being an entrepreneur or running your own business, you very often will have less time. You may even be less in control of your time. Obviously, there's ways that you can learn to harness it and use your time better and manage all those things better. But I think people don't always see that side of it. What people think they want is to do entrepreneurship or to do this, to that. What they really want is this sense of freedom or being able to control your time, and then also the sense of purpose. In terms of the freedom, I'm going to ask you about the purpose thing. In terms of freedom, I think you can find a balance. Part of it is managing up, so being able to work with your boss to curate a schedule or a framework where you're able to do your best work, and we can talk maybe more about what that requires. But I think the purpose thing, I'm interested to know from you, because I've had this conversation go multiple ways where people ask, should you chase your passion? And should you just go and do the job that just sets you on fire, and that's the only kind of work that you should ever do and that you should ever love?
It's tough, man. I mean, as you said, you've probably had a conversation a million times because everyone has different perspectives on this. Because I mentor some guys and we talk about this quite frequently. I think the first chimera you have to kind of just shatter is that, the idea that there's one job that will satisfy every passion, desire, interest you have is obviously wishful thinking. Doesn't exist. But there are jobs that scratch, I guess, the majority of itches or a few itches you have. And I think there's a number of things you can do in your life that don't always have to kind of be for profit or for money, and you just do it because you're passionate about it. I don't think you have to monetize everything there. I think there is something about this generation that's all about multiple streams of income, monetizing everything. And that probably adds to the difficulty when it comes to ascertaining what you ought to do with your lives, because it's very possible, and has always been the case, to have one major job where that's where you mainly make your money. and then to have different passions and interests that you pursue on the side that add color to your life. And they're good in and of themselves because they add color. They're not good in so much as they can be monetized. You can just have it as something that brings you joy. I play a lot of tennis, for instance. I know I won't win the Grand Slam. It's sad. My heart breaks every time I say that. I'm genuinely sad to say that. However, it adds color to my life. It helps me sharpen my competitive edge. It gets me very focused. I get better. When I get better at that, I get better at other things as well. So the value it has in my life is enormous. I would even say sometimes it has greater value and sharper than me than some of the work I do, because some of the work I do is quite repetitive. So in that way, when we see work as what it is, which is I'm contributing towards the advancement of a company or a company's vision, the company's goal, whatever it is, and in turn this work is meaningful and purposeful, but that's all it is, and it can stay as that. Then it's like I don't have to be looking for one thing that will kind of fulfill all of my wildest dreams and desires, because that doesn't exist. The entrepreneurship thing I find quite interesting because, and maybe this is the issue again people have with personal development and all that kind of stuff, because it does glamorize this sense of control and being, if you're a male, the alpha, if you're a woman, the kind of go-getter, whatever it is. And it's so interesting to me when I find people who do that thing, which is, I'm interested in self-development because it gives me the illusion of control and progress, when realistically all I'm doing is controlling like my time better, but my outputs don't necessarily follow. It doesn't follow that if I go to bed at 10 and wake up at 5, I will achieve like lots in the world. There's still a missing part that people haven't quite figured out. Likewise, because I start a business doesn't mean I'm gonna, succeed, or I'm going to actually have a business. And I remember a mentor telling me once when I was kind of considering leaving something, and he was like, Mike, would you rather be a big part of nothing or a small part of something? Because he was like, a lot of people say CEO, but they missed the point of CEO. CEO means Chief Executive Officer. The presumption there is there are other executive officers. Yeah. But there's a lot of businesses where it's really you're really the OEO, the only the only executive officer. Yeah. To speak to some of that, because I know that was a lot.
Yeah, okay. Let me go back into some of what you said. So, no, I completely agree. I think, okay, so going back to the beginning of what you're saying, I think you definitely really did a good job of encapsulating the issue around this chasing your passion thing. Because even with the tennis that you mentioned, and this is what I think people miss, you didn't quit your job and decide to just do tennis. That might be what you're passionate about, but it's not necessary that you drop everything and just go do that thing. So I think the difference is, yes, you should optimize for your passions. You don't need to chase your passions necessarily. Again, I'm happy to be wrong on this.
Some people are going to be like, what, David?
I'm happy to be wrong on this. But what I usually say, and I'll even put it to you this way, would you love tennis as much as you do if you were really bad at it?
Probably not.
Like if you were really bad, like from the very first time that you tried it, you just didn't have the coordination, you kept missing the ball, you wouldn't even, I think usually when people start to love something is when they realize not necessarily that they can be good. It's not about winning Grand Slams or being the best, but you can be competent. Yeah. Right? And when you're missing that sense of competence, that's when you start to hate what it is that you do, or whatever that thing is. And so I think that's usually the missing link for people, where they are trying to do some kind of job or trying to figure something out that either they're not competent at or they don't enjoy. And so, okay, this leads me into something else. I forget the names of the researchers, but I don't know. We'll put it in the description or something. Yeah. But the second person is Dodson. So I think it's like Eves Dodson, something like that. It's a stress curve, and it essentially charts how interested you'll be in something. And so what people don't understand about stress is that stress can be a good thing. Stress can be a fantastic thing. And the way stress works is that stress is a spectrum. And so on one end of the stress curve, you have boredom, and the other side, you have like anxiety. This is like, something that is keeping you up at night and is extremely what people usually think of as stressful. But there's actually an optimal point of stress where you're not bored, but you're stimulated enough to be interested, but you're not overstimulated to the point where you become anxious. And I think that's what people are looking for. And that's what you should be looking for. So whether it's a job, you don't want it to be not stressful enough that you're bored, but just enough, potential energy that you have to wake up. That's it. You have to be alert. Yeah. You have to be on top of it. And so I think it's combining that with the passion element, whether that is in your job or you can build it into your life, where, okay, you can make time to do this thing that you enjoy. And I think if you were competent at your job and it was stressful enough in the scientific term of stress, not necessarily the way it's commonly used, but it contained enough, potential energy that it would wake you up but not make you anxious, then you would love it.
Yeah.
And it might not be your favorite thing in the world. It's not saying that, oh my gosh, I love these spreadsheets, this is my life. But you would be able to find some enjoyment in what you were doing.
One of the reasons I'm nodding like, yes, is because I just had dinner with somebody who was sharing with me that, that life's a mess, and a lot of things were going on at the time. And as they were talking, it became very apparent to me that they had a lot of tension in their life, and tension we can call stress, because there was just a lot going on. And I was kind of sharing with them. I said, well, listen, all the tension you have in your life and the stress, it's actually really good. And I think stress can be, as you said, like destructive, or it can be very, very productive. It can be a sign that you're doing something meaningful, something that you care about, that you're present and in the moment, something that matters, that's consequential, versus something that doesn't really matter. And so I said, if you take a car, for instance, and maybe it's an odd example, but I think it's good. The way a car moves forward, if I just simplify things down, are two clutches come together. There's energy there, a bit of tension. That tension propels the car forward. But at the same time, it's very managed tension in the car. If the car isn't well orientated or isn't well kind of structured, then you're literally sitting down on something that could kill you, essentially. Like if something could seep out of place, or a nut isn't quite screwed on the way it ought to be screwed on, then you're in a death trap, essentially. But the car is built in such a way that all that tension within the car, all that tension within the engine, it moves the car forward. It's a clunky example, but it points to this idea that tension and stress can actually can propel us forward if we manage and steward it well. But when we don't, it can eat us up and totally destroy us and get us to a place where we're like, what's going on? Because if you're doing a job and you're starting to feel as though you're not quite where you need to be, you aren't as good as you are. I remember when I first started my master's, 3 weeks into it, I wanted to quit because, whilst I did well on my undergrad, on my master's, there was a Jewish rabbi, a mum of 5. It was just like the most random mix of people. And I was like, I don't. And then the topic was really hard as well. I called my friend. I was like, this is dead. I'm not sure I want to do this, whatever. And she was like, you're just not good at it yet. But if you give it a few weeks and months, she was totally right. I loved it. I even lobbied and started a PhD after. I realized that all that tension and stress was actually, the information was really trying to tell me is, Mike, you're doing something that matters and you're not good at it, and you have the potential to become good at it. And if you manage that tension well, it will propel you forward through your whole degree. You'll do well and you'll carry on studying. Have you had those moments where you started something and you're like, I suck, and you're feeling a lot of stress, and then it ended up kind of going well?
Yes, yeah. I think even part of it is, it's the initial experiences that you have that shape your perception of what the thing is.
Yeah.
So the analogy I use is like swimming. And sometimes people say, oh, I can't swim.
Can you swim?
I can swim.
Oh, wow.
Yes. But this is part of the analogy, right? I can't swim in whitewater rapids with rocks and all kinds of stuff, and the tide is coming fast. No, now I can't swim, right? You put me in a pool, relaxed water, I can swim great.
With floaties, or you're good with that?
No, with no floaties.
Let's go.
But I think this is part of what I mean, right? Where people judge their ability to do the thing without considering that it's not just about your ability to do the thing and how good you are doing it, but it's also the conditions that you're doing it in. So yes, you could swim in a pool. If your first time trying to swim was you jumped into a stream that was rushing, the tide of the water, the current of the water was rushing really fast, there's rocks in the water, that's terrible. Now you hate swimming, right? This is the worst possible swimming experience you could ever have. And you could have this perception like, oh my gosh, I can't do it. This is the worst thing in the world. But you could similarly drop into a pool of shallow water, a tiny little, almost like a puddle. Of course you can swim now, right? Even doing the same things, even if you don't have the technique right, suddenly it's a lot easier. It's almost effortless. And so I think that's the difference that a lot of people don't get is that you also have to factor in the conditions that you're facing. And sometimes people try something once and they feel like it's impossible, but it's because they tried the hardest possible version of that thing. Yeah. Like there's another version of this thing that you could have tried. Even with the entrepreneurship thing, people jump in and they're trying to raise venture capital straight away. They're going straight to the hardest version of this thing and they fail and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm really bad. I can't do this. But it's like, okay, there are lots of different ways you could have dipped your toe in and learned to swim without dropping into a waterfall. You don't have to do it in that way.
We actually talk about this all the time when we talk about like discipline. I do a masterclass on discipline, 3 hours long, and to your point, we talk about this idea that discipline is a muscle. And we talk about Wolff's theorem and how kind of muscles build and micro trauma. And, you have a muscle, you stretch it a bit, you tear some muscle fibers. When the muscle builds back stronger, so when the muscle builds back, it sends signals to your brain, to your muscle saying, your brain sends signals saying, build back a bit stronger to protect it. So you'll just do that. And if you do that a couple of times, if you iterate the process, so to speak, that's how you get muscle growth. It's kind of straightforward. And so with discipline, which a lot of people kind of say they want to grow in, they jump to the wake up at 5 a.m., only eat once a day. All these things that you're like, yo, why don't you just kind of like slow down a bit? Why before you wake up or stay awake all night? Why don't you just start by going to bed on time? Yeah. Or something way more manageable, and then slowly stress test that. Giving yourself room to kind of your brain, your body, room to kind of learn. Okay, cool, we're moving up a rung here, and just like slowly get better at something rather than jump into the having a bad experience. I mean, simple example: you go to the gym. Okay, you haven't been to the gym for 6 weeks, 2 months, whatever it is. Okay, you get in the gym. All right, load me up, let's go. You're gonna get hurt, aren't you? And then you'll be like, I hate gym, I suck at gym, I pull the muscle, whatever. But if you just go there, so you start with a bar, do something quite light, your body gets ready and it does that again. I wonder if it's because people on social media perhaps compare themselves to people who they see the outcome of a person and they go, oh, I want that. So they just kind of, I want to do what they do without realizing that there's a whole process that you can't skip. Yeah. And I loved something I heard recently, that people want like the outcome of somebody without the process. And they think somehow you can get that because on social media you can just get whatever you want.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the paradigm that people miss is that not all pain is the right pain. Yeah. So in the analogy that you just used, going to the gym, like, are you building muscles or are you just crushing yourself? Because the funny thing is, a lot of people envisage that hard work needs to look hard and it has to be painful. But okay, if you build the muscles and you're trying to lift 100 kg, if you had built enough muscle to lift 100 kg, it wouldn't feel as hard as it's feeling right now, right?
But you should have done.
So it's still hard. It's still, effort. Yeah. But if you build the muscles in the right way, it's actually less effort. And so this reminds me of a really good analogy I came across not long ago. I think it's a guy called Michael Ashcroft, and he was writing, and he used the analogy of grinding. And what I loved about this is that people think about grinding as a good thing, right? Rise and grind. I'm grinding. I'm on my grind. But grinding is about effort, right? And I think the mistake that people make is mistaking effort for output. And people think that, as long as if it feels hard, if it feels like, I'm grinding, I'm waking up at 5 a.m., I'm staying awake, my eyes are red, I'm losing my mind, but it's okay because I'm grinding. Yeah. And the analogy that he used is essentially, grinding is, the equivalent of grinding is like driving a car with the hand clamped down, right? The car's going to be grinding. You're going up a hill, it feels hard. You're like, why is it so hard? And you feel like, okay, I'm going to press on the accelerator. And you can do that. You can drive a car up a hill with the handbrake down. It's going to be hard, but you can do it. And that is what some people think success looks like. Like, oh my gosh, I lifted this heavy weight, I did it. Or you could take the handbrake off. Like that might look like success and it looks like you did it well. Yeah. And you had this sense of grinding, you had this feeling of effort, but there's another way, a much easier way. And if you can find the handbrake, if you can find this point of leverage or this thing that makes something that previously felt hard a bit more effortless, then you have the same outcome. You can get from point A to point B, and it doesn't have to be a struggle. It doesn't have to be something you lose your mind over.
And you do less damage to yourself longer, and you're able to do the thing
exactly
for much longer. I mean, we talked about this industry, and now we're fully in this industry now. It seems we're trading self-development points. One of the most frequent questions I get asked, and we'll do these two questions. The first one is how I manage to do what I do in the day, as it were. So rather than me answer, I'd love you to answer. I imagine you have busy days, some not so busy days, but how do you get the most out of your days? What kind of things do you put in place, and how do you think about it?
It's a good question. To be honest, I'm probably even doing what I just said you shouldn't do. Not necessarily, but I think if I'm completely honest, the easiest thing that I've done is just waking up early. And the way that I'll explain this is I have been waking up early for years, but the way that I've done it has changed, and the way it's impacted me has changed. When I was in sixth form, I remember I didn't study. I just was going to,
those guys,
having fun, doing whatever. And then it came to the last few months, and now I had to start studying. So now I stopped going to classes, and I just had a desk, and I put all the books on the desk, because I was having to learn some stuff from scratch. So I was blocking my whole day out for 8 hours. So I would sleep for 4 hours a night. And when I say 4 hours, I don't mean, that's not an exaggeration, because whenever I was going to bed, I had my computer connected to speakers, and there's a alarm clock app that on the computer, and I would just set it for 4 hours after whatever time it was currently, so I know it was 4 hours, and it would wake me up at that time. And now I have to get up and I have to start working, and so usually I think I'd sleep from about 10 till 2 a.m. and then get up and work, and then work through the day, and So that's an example of, wow, I woke up really early, I worked really hard. That was killing me, man. I remember one time I was pulling all-nighters. I think I went 2 days without sleep. On the third day, I actually just woke up on the floor.
Of course, your body's like,
my body
you're done.
Gave up. Exactly. And that's an example of waking up, but that's grinding, right? That's doing it in a way that my body can't cope with, my mind can't cope with. I'm forcing myself for the sake of forcing myself, because it feels like if I'm putting in so much effort to move this car up a hill, it must be a good thing. Whereas now, I wake up early, but it's almost the reverse. I wake up early to take pressure off myself. The reason I wake up earlier now is because if I woke up later, my day, I would have to condense more into less time, and I would feel more stressed. So if I can wake up an extra 2 hours earlier, even if I do nothing, even if I can wake up at 5 and spend an hour on Twitter, I didn't do that in the workday. I can, I can even nap. It changes the way I perceive it, where if I have this extra time, if I need a nap, if I need to spend time scrolling on social media, if I want to be unproductive, I can do that now and get it out of the way. Now it's out of my system, it's done. I've spent enough time on Twitter. Now I can work.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it. Because you're making time for lack of productivity even, rather than get...
But it's both. I mean, sometimes it is also ridiculously productive because in the evening now, I don't know if it's just getting older, but I'm tired.
Yeah, I can't lie. This is the thing as well. I think there's a timing bit to it as well, because I remember, I think I wrote this in one of my newsletters. I remember when I was on YouTube and I read that Steve Jobs wakes up at 5 or whatever it is. I remember being like, 5 for me as well. And this was maybe in university. I woke up at 5. I had nothing to do. I was just like, what am I meant to do? I remember I went for a walk. I went to the gym. It was just really random because I had nothing to do. Most days, and I realized, I look after a few companies, my to-do list has never ended ever. And it took me a while to realize that. I used to have a lot of anxiety about my to-do list. I would want to get it done, let me get the day done. Until I started realizing it's been years and I've never finished, because my job is literally to find issues and solve them. Yeah. And so I realized that I was putting myself on a really unhealthy trend where I was like, I'll be happy when I've done my tasks, when my tasks can never be done. And so I'm never happy, so to speak. So that's another thing to solve. But as I've gone older and I've started to work a bit more, and I realized that I actually have a lot of stuff to do. And so for anyone who has lots of things to do, And who knows that, I just advocate waking up earlier, because if all you get is an extra hour or an extra 2 hours, if you wake up at say 5, then you're able to get stuff done early, or as you said, prepare yourself to hit the ground running the minute you get to work.
Yeah. Because
one thing I found is, especially, and this is no shade to people who work for us, but sometimes people get here and the first hour they're kind of like, oh, hello.
Yeah.
The weather, isn't it bad?
Yeah.
Oh, what did you do yesterday? And I'm like, this is great, but let's get to work, folks.
Now that everyone's gone,
I know this is just everyone's going. I'm like, let's talk the real talk.
Yeah.
So if you can get that hour away and just kind of build that ramp, you can hit the ground running the minute you get to work. Now, if you're an entrepreneur, it's the minute you open your laptop, it's the minute you kind of have your first meeting. You already have a runway, so to speak, so that when people are starting to yawn, you're like, oh no, I did that 2 hours ago. I'm ready to go, so to speak. But as we said before as well, waking up early is half the story, right? The real issue is going to bed on time.
Yeah.
Thankfully, if you've worked out, so gym, or you're going for a run, or whatever it is you do for exercise, it's easier to fall asleep at night because your body's actually like, yeah, let's go to bed, like, let's do it. But this FOMO thing, I think, is what really stresses even older people. There's this idea that all the best shows come on after 10. I'm going to miss something really important. There's a FaceTime conversation. There's something that's happening. How do you overcome that FOMO and actually go to bed so you can wake up early in the morning to start a routine?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I need to think about that for a second. So I think part of it is just hard.
Yeah.
And you do need to get over the FOMO. So I'm trying to separate, there's a part of this I'm going to come on to in a second, which relates to a newsletter I just wrote today, actually. But I think the first part of it is, it's just inertia and momentum. You need the initial bit of inertia to get the ball rolling. And that might be, if you try waking up 3 hours early one day, you're going to get tired. And suddenly, at least the ball is rolling in the right direction. Or, because I think it's maybe potentially easier to do that than to try and going to bed early, 3 hours early for the first time. You'd be like, what? If you're used to going to bed at 1 a.m. every day, and now you have to go to bed at 11 p.m. or even 10 p.m., that's going to be hard. So I would say that. I would also say, even for me, I'm trying to get off screens late in the evening. That's been hard. Because a lot of the time, if you're busy, if you're working during the day, you want to have the evening to decompress and to take some load off. I think one thing that the hidden cost that maybe people fail to appreciate is the way that a lot of that impacts you. And so, if you're feeling groggy in the morning and that's why you feel like you can't wake up, maybe it's because you didn't go to bed on time. Yeah. Right? And so it's this thing where we feel like, oh, I want to do this because this is how it makes me feel, this is how I feel in the morning. I don't feel like this, I feel like that. But you don't account for the hidden cost of, but actually, if you went to bed a bit earlier and if you want to read late at night, read in the morning. If you want to scroll social media late at night, scroll in the morning. Yeah. Very often, and it's funny, when I started doing this, the people that you were talking to at night, some of them are still awake.
Well, you wake back.
Yeah. Some of them are still there. But also, I think what is useful is you wake up, all the notifications are there. And now you don't have to be scrolling. You don't have to be checking your notifications every 2 seconds. Yeah, to see if anyone, trying to figure out if anyone said something to you. Because if you send all your tweets first thing in the morning, all the replies will be there by the time you come back to it. Yeah. And so that's one conceptualization. The other part that's really interesting to me, and I'd love to know what you think about this, and this is the part that I've been writing about, is so the newsletter I wrote was about this idea of mini metaverses. Yeah. And that's just a term that I made up. Yeah. But what I'm finding really interesting is that, again, something that people miss. People talk about the metaverse as this future dystopian world, or whether it's dystopian to you or not, where you're going to be wearing a headset and you're going to be in this digital world. Everything you interact with is digital. Most of us live in those worlds now. And I think what's really interesting is that you're surrounded by personalization algorithms. When you go on Netflix isn't just showing you what's popular in your area. Yeah. Netflix has an algorithm that is actively, one, is personalizing recommendations for you. But not just that, even the things that it's showing you, it changes the thumbnails of what it shows you based on what it already knows about you. If it knows, and it does this by, even as you're scrolling, if it can see that you recognize an actor on one show, or you've watched a show with this person, if they're in another show, they will change the thumbnail image of that show to show you that actor and say, oh, you like Uma Thurman? She's in this. You like John Travolta? He's in this. And that's how it's showing it to you. But then when you take that, that's a microcosm, you make that macro, almost every platform that you go on is doing that. You go on Twitter, it's showing you things, either things that you love or things that you hate, things that you are guaranteed to interact with.
Yeah.
That are going to make you react in some way. You go on Instagram, it's doing the same. You go on TikTok, it's doing the same. And so what you end up with is a world where everywhere you turn, it's almost like mirrors reflecting back at you. And they are just showing you things that you love or things that you hate. And it becomes really hard to find objective truth. Because what does normal look like? You don't actually get to see that anymore, because all you see is what's reflected back at you. And so that's how people very easily end up in worlds where it feels like, oh, everyone around me is into this. Everyone around me is struggling with that. They might not be. What you are being shown is everyone around you that is struggling with that, or that is feeling those things. So even when we just talked about, so to bring this back full circle to what you were just saying with Twitter is huge. There are some areas of Twitter, if you're always seeing ratchet stuff, or if you're always seeing things that you don't necessarily want to interact with, if you're always seeing things that make you angry or make you upset, make you argumentative, bring out some bad parts in you that keep you up late into the night, that is intentional. And the more you interact with it, the more it's going to continue. So it's until you break that cycle, you're not going to be able to break that pattern, because everywhere you go, that same stuff is still going to be shown to you. So you actually have to start intentionally changing what you interact with, and intentionally changing and curating your content consumption, because otherwise you'll just be led by your previous self, right? The things that you consumed yesterday when you weren't caring about this stuff, that stuff is going to keep being broadcast to you. It's like building a street for your house that is full of all the bad treats you could possibly have when you're trying to lose weight. And imagine your street, every time you left your house, your street reconfigured itself to show you all the things you ate before. If yesterday you weren't on a diet and you were eating pizza and chips and ice cream, now your house is full of
pretty much, aren't you?
Now your house is full of pizza and chips and ice cream, and you can't find a salad.
I like the way you put it. It's so interesting because it's the whole creatures of habit thing, right? The fact that we're creatures of habit. And we love, like, our body and our mind loves patterns, it loves repetition. And so you're right, you know, if I go on Twitter and I see something that doesn't fit the pattern I've been shown, I'm like, what's going on here? Like, sometimes I might even be like, whoa, what's going on? And it's happened before where I've seen videos that I'm like, yo, what's going on? And the reason why apps and platforms are scared to show you that is because they're afraid that you're going to have negative reaction and you'll leave the platform if you don't get what you've always kind of had. To talk about, like, routines, especially waking up early, you know, your body is the same. Like, your body literally carries habits and loves habits. If you always have snacks at 7, you know what happens at 7. There's something that happens when I used to go, when I was younger. The minute I would be fine during the bus ride home, you know, from school. The minute I get to my street, I just have this desire to use the toilet. And it starts intensifying the closer I get to my door. And I'm like, why does this happen? This used to happen all the time. And I realized, so my body is programmed, you know, me to think, okay, when I'm near my door, you know, I get back from school, I go to use the toilet. And that's how, like, deep and insidious it is, right? And so when we're trying to build new systems or build new patterns for our lives, the first few weeks or days feels like hell. I remember trying to go to bed at 10. I was like, I'm not tired. I'm just looking around at the walls like, this is not working. It's because my body was slowly trying to make sense of this journey. And in fact, I think my body was testing me to some degree. Like, you sure you want to do this? You sure? We get all the way, Michael? Fast forward, I can't imagine myself staying up till 1 a.m., 2 a.m. That's wild to me. It may happen, but when it happens, I'm like, whoa, that was wild, kind of thing, right? And so it's very, very possible to change our patterns. We just got to recognize that little bridge, that little period where our body's like resisting it, it's just our body figuring out what this new habit we're about to create is. And I always tell people this: if it's possible to build bad habits, then it's possible to build good habits. And so it's important to note that. The reason why I encourage folks about waking up early too, is because there is something about rhythm that I think we don't speak about enough. And I know this because I've spoken to a lot of people who achieve and have done lots of cool things, and they all talk about the same phenomena, which is like when they're not feeling their best and they're not like super motivated, there's a certain rhythm that still carries them throughout the day. Mm-hmm. So whether it's waking up and doing emails, taking the kids to school, getting back home, doing some jiu-jitsu, then like doing emails again, and when it's really fine-tuned and well-oiled, even when you're not feeling up to it, somehow you get through the day, and even your low productivity days are sort of high productivity when you think about the general public, so to speak. I think when it comes to kind of top tech CEOs or folks who drive some of the biggest companies, some of the biggest and some of the most impactful things in the world, they have to function this way, right? Such that their low productivity days are still days that a lot of people would dream of having because their structure and pattern is so well oiled. If we all did that, I just wonder how much more productive we'd all be if we just had a pattern and a system. And even the creatives who like to be free, it's your body, freedom's great, but your body still likes habits.
Oh, but what I was going to say about that is everyone is like that. Yeah. Everyone has that already. The habits are just not the habits they want.
That's the one.
Right? It's the exact same mechanism. I used to have this issue where I would just end up watching TV before bed. Where was my remote? Where did I keep it? The place for my remote? On my pillow. Literally next to my head.
My pillow.
Right? So why is it so difficult for me not to watch TV every night? Because the remote is next to my head. Right? As soon as I put it on the table across the room,
everything changes.
I just get into bed because I already have the habit of getting to bed. Now that I'm in bed, the remote's not here. I can't be bothered to get back out because I got into bed to be in bed. I go to bed.
Literally. And those little changes.
Yeah.
It must have felt terrible, I imagine, the first few days, first few weeks. Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, it does. But I think very often people don't realize how often they've already built the habits that they need to use. You just need to change the way that you use this mechanism. And so that's one part of it. The other part of it is that you need to prime the pump in a way where you can't just think you can switch something on and it's going to switch on. You have to intentionally plan and prepare for it in advance, right? If you're trying to eat healthy and you go and open your fridge and there's not healthy stuff there, you're not going to eat healthy. Yeah. That's it, right? Now it's delivery time. That's exactly what's going to happen. So you need to order the healthy food so that it's in your fridge, so that by the time you're ready to eat, you already have the food there. Now you don't have the choice. Now it's easy. And again, this goes back to what we were saying about grinding and effort, right? There is one world in which, man, you could try your best to open the fridge, you see the chips there, I'm going to reach for the salad. Or you could not have the chips. The chips could not be there. Now, it doesn't matter. Now, there's no choice.
That's really good.
And so I think this goes to even what you were saying about like some high-powered CEOs or people like that. Really good examples. Barack Obama did this. I think Steve Jobs did this. And I'm not saying everyone needs to do the same. They just reduced their wardrobe massively. Barack Obama had a bunch of the exact same suit. Steve Jobs had a bunch of the exact same outfit. That reduces. So now you don't have to decide what to wear every day because you have 3 of the exact same turtleneck. Yeah. So which of my black turtlenecks am I wearing today? Doesn't matter. No one's going to know. I'm just going to pick one up.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Reducing the number of choices you make in your life, it just frees you up. And I get it. And I'm nowhere, comparing myself to Barack Obama, but I do get it. I do a number of different things, and honestly, the less choice I have to make, the better. When people come to me like this one or that, I'm like, you just decide, because I don't want to have to there's too many decisions to make. Like, you get to a stage where you're like, I would rather you just make the decision for me. And then if I can cut down decisions in my life, that's like meal prepping, for instance, is one of the key things. Like, yes, I love eating different foods, but I don't want to every lunchtime go, do I want chicken? It's literally a waste of brain space. So I'm just going to have the same thing every day for a week. And I prep it, I put it in the box. Like today at 5, I was like, oh, time for salad. I put it out at the salad. That's what I'm having for the next 5 days. Yeah. So lunch there's no discussion. Oh, you feeling like eating? I don't have that to come. Whatever is in that bag is what I'm eating, and we'll move on.
Because it's already in the bag. And sorry to cut you off, but this is another thing I think people don't realize. Discipline is a muscle. Discipline is not something you wake up overnight and you're hench. Like you got it's a muscle that you have to build. And it goes both ways, because also the more decisions you make in a day, the weaker your decision making gets. So it's not a case where, and I think this is the issue, people have very low willpower in the evening because you're making loads of decisions in the day. A lot of people don't realize that, one, willpower is a muscle, and two, the more that you use your willpower, the more it erodes. So almost think of it as almost like a time timer that starts each morning when you wake up. If you start using your willpower first thing in the morning, you have to start using your discipline. The more you use it, the less discipline you're going to have. The harder it becomes to use it, right? Once you've done 11 reps of 100 kg on the bench press, you're tired, man.
That's the one,
right?
Your muscles can't take it.
Exactly. So now this is not the time to suddenly decide that you need to make a huge decision because your muscles are worn out. You're tired. You can't do it anymore. So what you have to be able to do is conserve your high value and high impact decisions for the times when you actually need them. So I think exactly like what you were saying, if you can prepare in advance to take some decisions off your plate later, you're going to be better off. But not just that, it's about thinking about when to use willpower and when you don't need to. Right? People think of having a disciplined life as a life where a disciplined life is not a life where you always have to make hard decisions. Sometimes you make the easy decision in advance. The easy decision is not buying the chips. The hard decision is choosing whether you have the chips or the salad.
Exactly.
And I'm not hating on anyone that eats chips. I
Chips
don't
is
want
a
to keep
balanced
using
diet.
that.
We have to have a balanced
example.
diet.
But exactly, right? The best time to make the decision is when it's easy. Actually, you don't have to wait for it to get hard because it's gonna get hard.
Yeah.
But if you make the choice in advance and you preempt how difficult it's gonna be, now you don't have to make the hard decision. The hard decision makes itself.
And you're making decisions essentially that your future self will thank you for.
Exactly.
If you do that enough times, you do have an easy life, so to speak, right? So,
and you have the muscle of continuing to do it because now it's easy.
Well, where can people find out more about you, David, and all the things you write, all the stuff you do? Because I mean, this was too short. I'm sure people are like, carry on, but we have to stop. We have an agreement, so to speak. But when where can people find out more about this? And let's call this part one of this conversation because I think it should continue. I want to talk a lot more next time about kind of startup and building businesses and starting from the ground and even building a tribe. I mean, you have such an interesting experience kind of trying different enterprises or businesses or social enterprises. I would love to hear about how they're going, how they've gone, what you've learned from different ones. I mean, all that kind of stuff. But for now, where can people find out more about you?
Sure. So people can go to theknowledge.io. That is where all my writing goes, my podcast episodes, the best of everything I've got. Otherwise, you can find me on Twitter at Elikwu, and I think it's the same name on all social media, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. I'm there, the same name.
You're on TikTok as well?
Well,
you're on TikTok?
I'm not doing any dances, so if you're coming for that, I'm going to disappoint you.
I'm so tired of dancing on TikTok.
Yeah, I'm not.
It was cute. I like seeing a bit, but I tweeted the other day. If I see a group of 3 guys again doing, it's too much.
But what I found so weird, and I don't know if you've seen this, and this goes back to what I was mentioning about the mini metaverse thing. I've seen groups of kids outside not playing or even looking or interacting much with each other because they have put their phone down and they're dancing for their phone. And here's the thing, you don't even know if anyone's going to watch it. You're dancing for an imaginary audience that you believe the algorithm is going to guide people to watch. And again, going back to like the question of, would you do it if it was hard? If no one was going to watch it, maybe some people will still do it. But I think when you see some of these crazy skits that people do and people pouring milk on their head and doing kind of crazy stuff, would you do that if no one was watching? I just want everyone to ask themselves that question, right?
A nice takeaway to us. Hey, thank you for taking time to watch that video. Here at the Common Sense Network, we thrive on exposing you to different ideas. If you're someone who likes ideas, you like learning new things, hit the subscribe button now and turn on notifications so you're first to hear when we have a new video out.